All right, ladies and gentlemen, we now have part 8 wrapped up. We have functioning life bars for our dying cells. So let's go ahead and come over here to our overview and mark off these major sections. So that now moves us into part 9. Let's go ahead and jump up to part 9 over here on the whiteboard. Whew, lots of stuff. Okay, in part 9, what are we going to do? We're going to make all of our screens available. Basically, we're going to create a title screen. We're going to create the level change screen, the death screen, and the game over screen. Now, we are not focusing on making any kind of screen management system, which is something we will be looking at in later volumes of the XNA Xtreme class. Right now, the idea of precision is just to present everything that you've seen from Volume 1 all the way up to now in the XNA Xtreme class in a relatively simplified game, but there's a lot of stuff going on. Things like screen management systems, etc., just kind of complicate things even more, and we want to keep this very focused on the gameplay itself, if you will. So we'll come back to that later. So because of that, we're going to keep this very simple. So what we're going to do is we are going to create very simple methods inside the game class for handling such things as draw the title screen, which is like a one-liner. Just draw this texture. The level change screen, here, draw these things. Now, level change screen is actually going to be the most complex screen of the 4 different screens we need to draw, for the simple fact that it needs to show you what level you're on, how many cells, how many enemies, and we don't have all of that information at the moment, but we'll get everything in place, so going back and adding that information later will be easy. So once again, 4 different screens that we need to worry about drawing, and we're going to set these up inside of 4 different methods. Now, with that, we need to go ahead and get a start on game states. Now remember, game states lie at the heart of precision. Basically, you are always in some sort of game state, be it at the title screen, be it at a level change screen, or you're playing, or you just died. Well, what we're going to do is go ahead and get the title screen tied in at the very beginning when you launch Precision, so you come into the right place, and you have to hit the start button on your Xbox 360 controller to forward yourself into a playing state. Now, we also need to make sure we test all of these other screens we put together, so we will put a little bit of code here and there that will enable us to test what the different screens look like, but keep in mind we're not going to fully implement all of game states in this video, because there's a lot more that we need to add in regards to the game rules itself, like level changes and stuff like that. So we'll come back to that later, but we will get a start on it. So that is our objective of this part. So let me go ahead and jump in here real quick, turn this off, and cruise all the way up to the top and grab myself a new white sheet. And let's go ahead and write out exactly what it is we're going to be doing. I will keep this very simple because, Logan, I don't believe there is anything new in here that they've never really seen before. This is all really straightforward stuff.
Right. Everything is just basically some form of data and then some way to render that data onto the screen, because it's really that simple. All these screens themselves are static. Nothing moves around, nothing's animated. These are simple informational screens. Some of them are based largely on a full screen graphic.
Yeah.
So some of them will be very simple. But I mean, even when we get into the more complex level change screen, that's only complex. It's not even really complex. It's just that there's more things to draw.
Exactly. So we're going to be doing all of our work here inside the game class this time around, and we'll start off by adding a series of new fields in that we're going to need. And first thing is a sprite font. Remember, we had that Xyrod font, the free font that we had downloaded from the internet that we are using. So we needed to go ahead and set up a field for referencing that guy.
Right, we always had the asset, but we have not yet added a field to reference that inside of the game. So since we're getting into screens, and screens are what are actually going to use the font and the text drawing abilities, we're going to need to have this available in order to draw screens.
So we will come up with a main font. And, of course, with each of these things that I'm showing you, we're also going to need to turn around after declaring them. We need to load them as well. That's going to be important. Now, we've got a series of textures that we're going to add as well. So let me go ahead and just jot down texture 2D. We have got a overlay texture.
Now what this is going to be used for is some texture to hold for the died and game over states, because we had talked about and showed in playing the game that when you die or hit a game over state, you have this red overlay that is drawn over the screen. You can still see things below it, but we're going to be drawing this based on a texture, and we need to have that texture held somewhere.
Exactly. Let's see, we've got, and instead of writing texture 2D again, I'll just do that. We've also got a title texture.
And this is going to be the full screen texture that is going to draw whenever in the title state. So this is where I was getting at, that the title state is very simple because it is really just a matter of rendering that texture.
That's right. We've got another texture 2D. This is going to be the level change texture.
Now with the level change screen, of course we're going to have all the information, but we're going to have a texture as a background, just so we don't have a completely black screen. We're going to have a nice faded texture in the background, just to add a little bit more body to that screen.
We're going to have, let's see, what else? Title texture, level change. We're going to have a color that we're going to add in here. Now this color is going to be an overlay color.
Now what the overlay color is going to be used for is the overlay texture is simply going to be a white fill texture. As a matter of fact, I'm going to reuse the fill 22 texture just because that fits my purpose. The idea that I wanted to have was a solid texture, so just the solid 2x2 pixels worked. Now I didn't want the graphic to be white. Instead, I wanted this fill color now to be red instead of white, so we're going to define a color that will accommodate the red texture. So we give a red of 200, and there we go. Now here's the key. The texture was supposed to be transparent. The fill texture is not, but as we found with colors when we did the sprite blend videos, is that colors could be transparent. Colors have an alpha channel. So that means we could use an alpha in conjunction with the solid texture and end up with a texture that is red and transparent. And that will accomplish the red overlay effect.
Exactly. Okay, so we'll have this set up so that we can turn around and use it. Now, once we have these fields in place, we're going to go ahead and turn our attention to creating the methods that will generate our screens. So let me just jot down methods. So our screens are going to consist of a draw title screen.
And I believe all of these should be pretty self-explanatory as to what they're supposed to do. We know the states that we have: title, died, game over, and level change, so they're each going to need an appropriate screen. The only one that doesn't have a screen as per se is playing, and that's because there's no single static element that we need to overlay in the playing state.
Exactly.
Each of these are going to be the informational screens that draw in each of their respective states.
And we're actually starting off simple and working our way to more complex screen methods.
You will note the order in which we're creating these is title. Well, title is very simple. N comes first, so that makes sense. We're going to switch over to death screen then, because while we do that transparent overlay, the overlay itself is rather simple, and the text on the death screen is also simple. So we are kind of progressing in a simple to complex method.
My undo stopped working, by the way.
Oh, nice.
So I was like, why is that not undoing my crazy spelling? Okay, go ahead and continue. Sorry about that.
But the game over screen is going to be pretty much the same thing. Really, it is going to be the exact same thing as the death screen, just with different words. We're leaving it as a completely separate method, though, just in case you want to have a different graphic, or to have graphics, or to have it behave entirely different. We'll leave that up to you for whatever you want to put in it.
Right.
So that leads us to the level change screen. We're doing that last because that has the most elements. Now we'll need to draw what level we're on, how many cells the level is going to have, and how many enemies. Now we don't actually have those numbers yet, but we can position all the elements. We know that we need. If you want, you can look back at the lesson where we demoed the game, because that showed that we began with a level number. So we said level and then some number. Then we had a graphic of the cell. Then we put like a little X for a time symbol and then some number. Then below that we had an enemy graphic, time symbol, and then some number. Now what we're going to do here is just put in maybe like the word num or some dummy holder, because we don't actually have the numbers for level, cell count, and enemy count.
Right.
So we're just going to have to put in dummy placeholders until we actually have real numbers. But otherwise we can get all the positioning out of the way. We'll have all of our elements, the images, the text all aligned and looking nice.
And the way we're going to handle positioning is just a very simplistic manner. We're more or less going to say just put it at this pixel, put it at that pixel, end of story. Because our game is defined at a very specific size, the game resolution is not going to change at any point. And because of that, we can say this is exactly where we want this text to go, and it's going to look right. Okay? And finally, let me just come down here and jot down draw method. We need to make sure that we test everything. So test screens.
Right. What we might do is set up the title screen itself, because that would be simplistic enough to set up even game state wise. But then we can turn around and use it to test a few things, and we could even go down to the playing section and draw the overlay screens, just so we get a good idea of what the overlay screens are going to look over an actual game field. And we also need input, because with the title state,
right,
we can put the drawing of the screen in, but it would also be nice to be able to advance. Now, we're not going to, like you were saying, we're not going to get game states finished. So what we'll do is a very simple advance. We'll just switch from title into playing.
Right. And that's it. It really is this simple. So, Logan, is there anything you want to add to this?
Nothing comes to mind.
All right. Well, guys, we're going to go ahead and jump over to Visual Studio in the next video and code all of this in so that we have fully functional screens. Thanks a lot, guys.